49er fans, we have a great show for you guys today. We have Emory Hunt, football analyst for CBS Sports and owner of Football Gameplan, joining us today. And if you can see his jersey in the back, former running back for the University of Louisiana Lafayette, which you guys may know, the 49ers have a pretty good running back from that same school on the roster at the moment. How you doing today, sir? I know your season's winding up here in 6 days.
I'm doing fine, man. I appreciate you bringing me on.
Yeah, let's dive right into these questions. All right. So, your football scouting draft guide that you created, you analyzed over 1,000 prospects in this draft class. Um, you know, Speaking on the 49ers, do you think they're in a good position in this draft? They don't have the first or second round pick, but they have the three third round comp picks and 11 total draft picks. So, you think they're sitting pretty, or they have some work to do with that?
I think they're fine, man, because one thing that gets lost in draft conversation is what's already on the roster. A lot of times answers may already be on the roster. So a team may not have space for a lot of draft picks. And on the other side of it, you look at, okay, they have a lot of draft picks. Maybe because the roster is so deep and talented, we can package some things and target specific guys and move up to go get 3 to 4 guys as opposed to spending 11 picks. So it's a unique way to look at the draft. That's why I love this whole process because teams draft last year, they bring in college free agents, and a lot of fans forget who's on the practice squad, who's third string at this position, and all they see is folks talking about the need there, and you're like, wait a minute, they brought this guy in last year who's been in the building, has been developing. They may have a plan for him to step in and be either their backup or a starter. So yeah, when you have a lot of picks and you're picking late, you tend to be in a little bit of a better situation to, hey, we could target maybe 5 guys, move some picks around, get up in the draft in these back ends, and just grab guys that we know that can help us this year based off our roster construction.
Yeah, and I love that answer because we do tend to overanalyze, the players high up in the draft most of the time, right? But if every draft guide and draft analyst does the same thing, right, with these 300, 400 players, you would never have these starters, all pros getting drafted in the fifth through seventh round, undrafted guys. And the 49ers seem to be one of the better teams at finding said players in those rounds. So, can you speak a little bit about your draft guide just for the people watching the show that may not have it, and how you go about scouting these players?
Yeah, it's a great question because here's my process starts in January because during the football season, the fall season, I'm covering NFL games, I'm calling college football games, covering college football games, and I don't start doing draft work until January when I start going to the All-Star games. So I go to all 8 All-Star games. I was at all 8 this year. The Tropical Bowl, FCS Bowl, the NFLPA Bowl, Shrine, Senior, College Gridiron Showcase, the HBCU Legacy Bowl, and was also at the Hula Bowl. So you saw me at all 8 All-Star games. So that gives me a good foundation of these prospects that are at these games. And then you factor in the prospects that will declare the juniors. So now I have over 1,000 players that I'm just grading. And I don't start grading until after I get back. So, which is usually the week of the Super Bowl. So that first week of February, I am locked in my basement 12-hour days just burning through film, grading positions first and going to the next one. And so you work through that process. Then I have to take a break to go to the HBCU Legacy Bowl, then to the Combine. But I'm still grading film while I'm on the road. And then to get back and hammer away from March 6th to April 1st when this guy came out. So it's a lot of, every day is the same, but you got to stay on track if you want to finish it. So I take an average of 3 games per player, and I go through the film and assess my grade. Then I move on to the next guy. So it's a lot of work, but it's fun work, and it gives you a greater understanding of potentially what's out there in the class and where the depth is and where the top tier positions are. And it's fun. It's a fun process. and that's how I'm able to get 1,000 scouting reports. And it's not a list, where you have write-ups on 100 players and you list 900 players. It's all 1,000, you know, prospect reports, which is cool for the fan. It serves the fan no purpose um, to see a guy. Oh, he's my 47th ranked, quarterback. Well, why? Well, what's in this scouting report? And at least in this case, you have something. And fans really just want to know, what can this guy do? Where can he improve? And how can he help my team? They don't care about the vertical jump. They don't care about the 3-cone drill or nothing like that. They just really want to know, what can a guy do and what he can't do.
Exactly. And when you talked about going to all these games, when you're scouting and grading these lower level guys, NAIA, D2, FCS, players like that, does it make it a little easier to not, use some sort of bias against them when you see them at these bowl games prior to then grading them?
Yeah, because now you're seeing body types, because we know these college rosters lie. We know a guy listed at 6'3", 245 is probably 6'1", 220, and when you see him in person, and not every body type is the same. You know, for instance, if you told me um Jameer Gibbs was 5'10" and a half, 5'11", 215, watching him on film, you're like, yeah, that looks about right. And then when you see him in person and you're like, oh, I didn't realize, he was 5'9". I was shocked at how I thought Bijan Robinson was a bigger guy, but he was, just over 5'11". When I met him in person at the combine, I'm like, wow, he's a little bit leaner than I thought. So seeing body types at the smaller levels helps you more, and also seeing small college guys compete versus upper level guys, whether that's a NAIA guy competing against a Division II guy, or FCS guy, or an FCS guy competing against a Power 5 guy. Now you get to answer some of those questions. So when you go and watch their film, you already have in your mind the projection. Well, how would this guy do if he played at Florida State as opposed to Florida A&M? Well, I saw how he would do based off what I was out there in the at the All-Star game. And because I cover the NFL, you also have an idea of what works athletically at the NFL level. And then it just all that information that you gather in your work just kind of, helps narrow your focus into how you grade these prospects.
Love that answer. Yeah, it seems like you go through a really, really in-depth process, to get your list together, and I love it. So this question, doesn't pertain to this draft, but it does tie into a question that does. So, as you know, the 49ers have a quarterback debate, battle, whatever you want to call it, on the roster. What were your grades like on Trey Lance and Brock Purdy in their respective classes, if you kind of can think of it off the top of your head?
I wasn't as high on either. Less on Purdy than I was on Trey Lance. I want to say out that class, Trey Lance was that was the Trevor Lawrence, the
Uh, Fields,
okay,
Zach
so
Wilson.
if I remember, it was Trevor Lawrence, Fields, Zach Wilson was my top three. Then I had Mac Jones, I believe, and my QB5 was Trey Lance. And my grade on Lawrence was a 90, and my grade on Fields was like an 85, and Wilson was like an 83. I had a 75 grade on Lance, so I had some reservations. I saw him as a solid starter, but not someone that I would take in round one. I would take him more in round two, because to me, he just didn't have enough on film. Which is funny, because in this year's class, I have a higher grade on Richardson, who you could say the same thing. But at least we know Richardson played a lot in 2021, although he wasn't a starter. And then we saw him start a full slate of games this year. Lance didn't have that, and he started a full slate of games, but it was only 1 year he started in a predominantly run offense where he didn't throw a ton. And then the one game he played against Central Arkansas in that spotlight game that they was able to sandwich in 2020, he didn't play particularly well in that game. So he needed experience. But for him, the unfortunate part is that he just never really got it in San Francisco. because he stayed hurt, and they had Jimmy Garoppolo who was playing really well. So it's been tough for him. But Purdy was someone I didn't trust the arm strength. I felt like he took too many sacks, made some questionable decisions late in games. Big 12 championship game was one that came to mind. The one game where he just took a knee on fourth down. It was like, what was that about? And so you see some of that in the NFL. He's just like, being a little bit reckless back there. So it has worked out for San Francisco. He played well in the playoffs, and when he got in, he got his opportunity, took full advantage of it. To where now it's a conversation: or do we keep him, or do we move on with Lance, or which one? But the problem is he gets hurt too, and now you're really stuck. So I feel like they have a question at quarterback, not necessarily from a talent perspective, but from availability perspective, because who's going to play? You got Sam Darnold. You kind of know what you got in Sam Darnold. You can't trust him game to game. And so now it becomes a huge question mark. How healthy is Trey Lance? Can you trust him to stay healthy? Do you trust Sam Darnold to be a full 17 game starter? Do you want to rush Purdy back, or do you want Purdy to like kind of redshirt this year and hope you could bank on Darnold and or Trey Lance?
Yeah, and I promised you it would tie into this draft class because one player the 49ers have shown a ton of interest into this, leading up to the NFL draft has been DTR from UCLA. They've met with them 3 times, including a private workout, a formal top 30 work or meeting, and at the combine. So, could you kind of speak on why you think they would be that interested in him as a prospect?
He has the same type of mindset as a Brock Purdy. They're gamers. So, which is, you love that about them, that the no game feels like it's too big. They're going to keep trucking along. They're going to not be shy away from making a mistake, and they're not going to let that mistake linger in their head. They're just going to move on to the next play. He's athletic, so he can get outside the pocket, make throws on the move. He's a +1 in the run game. We've seen that over the course of his career. I love to bring up the Bowling Green game where he just kind of like took off and just found his way 70 something yards down the field for a touchdown. So he has that element. And he's played a lot of big games. So he's played a lot of big games at a big university like Brock Purdy. And also, here's someone that can do all the requisite things you need him to do throwing the football. I thought he had a really good week at the East West Shrine game.
And I believe you have him as your 10th quarterback, correct, on the draft guide? Yeah. And then another player that I wanted to touch on in your draft guide that the 49ers have shown a ton of interest into is they met with this guy 3 times, including a private workout that had 3 teams there. A top 30 visit is a Braden Daniels, who
Mm.
I believe you have as your number 1 tackle prospect. Can you speak a little bit about him? And, the 49ers kind of have a hole at right tackle. You think you could fill that in year 1?
I think so because I love his athleticism. I love the fact that he's able to dig guys up out the paint in the run game. And it's funny because the 49ers we kind of share a lot of the same sentiment when it comes to offensive linemen, because I had Aaron Banks as my number 1 guard the year he came out. And Banks is starting for San Francisco. I was a big Aaron Banks fan. It took him a while to get to that point, but now he's starting. Braden Daniels shares a lot of those athletic traits that you like to see. Some see him as a guard. I view him as a tackle, like you mentioned. I think he's the number 1 tackle because of his athleticism, his length, how he uses his length, and how well he does. So that would be a really good pick for them. Obviously, I would think so, but obviously for what they need and how they love to get their linemen on the move, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because, I felt like your draft guide kind of aligns to what we see with what the 49ers, like the way they tend to draft. The people you have higher up than most people are kind of similar to what the 49ers, I feel like they have higher up on their draft boards. Um, this is a question everyone's been asking in this offseason. Is there a Brock Purdy in this draft class that's going to, outperform at the quarterback position?
Absolutely. Man, listen, there's a lot of quarterbacks and it's unfortunate because of the nature of the position. There's only so many spots. And so you can only play one at one time. But as you noted in my draft guide, and as you probably have seen, I think highly of a lot of players, right? And so there's gonna be guys that's gonna get drafted later, and Adrian Martinez, or if he doesn't get drafted, or someone like a DTR, someone like a Jaron Hall, if he can stay healthy. You look at a Todd Centeio, I feel like a lot of people are not talking about. I'm a big fan of him. Lindsey Scott Jr., the talented passer from Incarnate Word. Matthew McKay, a guy that played at NC State, played at Montana State, played at Elon, played really well. There's a bunch of really good quarterbacks that have played a lot of football. So, yeah, there is a bunch of Brock Purdy's, I feel like, in this class. And that's the thing. I'm glad you brought him up, because Brock Purdy wouldn't be Brock Purdy if he never got the opportunity. And so there's a bunch of quarterbacks that can play, that can ball, that we never see get that opportunity, which is why I'm always excited about, guys going to the XFL or going to the USFL and playing ball, getting those reps, showing you that you can do the job, like a PJ Walker, like we see a Case Cook is doing right now with the Philadelphia Stars. So it's all about these guys getting the opportunity. And unfortunately, you know, you can't play two quarterbacks at once. So we won't know until somebody either goes down or someone earns that opportunity to usurp someone that may have the bigger contract, may have the bigger draft status. That you gotta have to play. You can't deny that this guy is talented. You gotta play him.
Love that answer. And, we spoke about how the 49ers draft well in the later rounds. George Kittle, fifth round, Talanoa Hufanga, I believe, was a sixth round, Dre Greenlaw, those type of guys, just crazy draft picks later in the draft. Who are some guys in those rounds that you see this year being that type of impactful player on any team in the league this year?
Unfortunately, he got injured leading up to the you know, pro day or whatnot, and Marte Mapu out of Sacramento State, who tore a pec muscle. He was phenomenal. But also, if you're looking for that type where, a guy that was a former safety or corner that now plays linebacker, or you're looking for someone that has that crossover athleticism, Michael Ayers out of Ashland, him and Mapu just were stars at the NFLPA Bowl. And Ayers, dominated his level of competition at Division II Ashland. Very good player. I could see him being someone's linebacker that can really star out that late. It's funny you brought up Hufanga. I had a high grade on him uh, coming out, and when you're watching film, you grade as you see. Like, am I bugging? Is this dude really good? And he is really good. And so I'm glad he got that opportunity despite where he was drafted. And I look at guys in this class. You look at um, Caleb Murphy out of Ferris State, uh, 25 and a half sacks as a senior, just insane production. BJ Thompson, a good athlete from Stephen F. Austin, another one that could be a late round pick that had a really good week at the East West Shrine game. So you think about those players, you think about if they go day three, late day three, that can end up making an impact. Aubrey Miller as an inside linebacker, another one out of Jackson State that had a fantastic Senior Bowl week. I'm excited to see. That's why I always watch everything about the draft, because I love day three. While everybody else is talking about day one, we're going to be on CBS Sports HQ, and I'll be on day three, giving you what you need to know about day three.
Yeah, and I love it because, early on in this process, we like to look and find those gems late in the draft and stuff. So we've interviewed quite a lot of people, and then, looking at your draft guide and seeing you were high on them as well, it was kind of reassuring for us. We've had Ulonzo Gilliam Jr., Eric Hallett, Robert Carter, Trevor Nowaski, Jake Witt, Caleb Murphy, and then the slot receiver. I don't know how you say his last name, from Fordham Fotis, Coco
Oh,
C. Lewis.
Coca Stoulis. Yeah, listen, I did the broadcast when they played. I was on the game. It was a 7 overtime game when they played Monmouth, and I'm like watching. I'm calling the game, but I'm like, this guy is just insane. Not only did he have, I think, 4 touchdowns and 300 yards receiving that day, um, but he also had like the kickoff return that put them in position to push the game into overtime. It was just like this dude was on fire. Then you watch him against Ohio, He did the same thing. I think he had like 14 catches for 280 or 300 yards. It was bizarre 2 week production he had. And he's not going. He didn't run the fastest, but he's always open, and he's productive. I'm a big fan of Fotis Koksoulis.
Yeah, and those slot guys, they don't really have to be the fastest. They just got to be, shifty, able to win, their routes and stuff like that. So I'd love to see him produce in the NFL. We spoke on, fifth to seventh round guys. You have any guys that you think that are going to be like PFA type of guys or undrafted guys that you think are going to make NFL teams this year? Because, we see it every year. Tons of undrafted guys make teams and some even go on to produce in year one.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to really peg one guy because a lot of these guys, you only have 250 so picks in a draft. So if I have a grade of someone in the 70s, I think they can make a roster. In terms of like as a priority free agent. So you're gonna see a bunch of guys get funneled out into the undrafted free agent market, but they still are really good, talented players. I would go and I think this guy gets drafted, but if he doesn't, someone's gonna get themselves a real corner, a real good corner, and Keenan Isaac out of Alabama State, long corner, 6'2", 188, had a really good game against Auburn, had a really good NFLPA Bowl in the HBCU Legacy Bowl. I think he'll do really well. You talk about Xavier Smith out of Florida A&M, slot receiver, quick, can help you instantly as a kickoff or punt returner. He could be someone that hears his name called on day 3, maybe in the 7th round, but if not, definitely a priority free agent that can help you right away.
Awesome. Love it. And, who are the guys in this draft class outside of the first round that you pound the table for? Like those are your guys. If you were in a draft room, that's the guy you got to go get, one or two guys.
Deuce Vaughn out of Kansas State. We watched him from the time he stepped foot on campus to the time of his last game against Alabama just dominate. Despite being 5'6", 175 or whatever he weighs, and he plays bigger than that. And you could watch Sproles and you watch his tape. You splice those games together, and they look like they're the same guy. And so I love his vision. I love his footwork. I love his ability to hit the home run. I think Deuce Vaughn could be a really good player. Defensively, I probably would pound the table for Michael Ayers. I talked about him earlier. Mapu started to get a lot of the props that he deserved, and I think Ayers should start getting some of those props as well, because he's just as good of an athlete.
Awesome. Love it. And yeah, I saw on Twitter yesterday, people were posting your running back list and they were kind of criticizing it a little bit. So, how do you respond to the critics? Because, the football community is brutal sometimes. Everyone wants to be right, have their, say, and, kind of downgrade people a little bit. So, how do you respond to the critics?
You don't, because you've been in this industry for, it'll be 16 years now. So I've seen, the entire spectrum. Everyone wants to be right immediately. And the funny part is these are the same people that was slaughtering me in 2016 because I had Carson Wentz as a 4th round talent. Fast forward to now. So the thing is, you gotta be, if you're gonna be in this industry, you gotta be willing to stand strong in your take, be able to let the take play out, and just come back and tell people, because those same people that are over aggressive online, they'll be the ones that you see in public, and they like, oh man, I enjoy your work, so
Yeah.
it's just behind the screen that you get that courage, and that's fine. But yeah, you got to be able to stand on what you believe based off the work you put in, and if you're going to be wrong, just be wrong, right? There's no downside in that, but the problem is people are so quick to say you are wrong without letting the process play out. And you look at 2018 or 2017 class, my top 3 quarterbacks were Watson, Mahomes, and Deshaun Kaiser. And my number 4 was Gerard Evans, who never got an opportunity to play in the NFL. And my 5th quarterback was PJ Walker. But we didn't get a chance to see PJ Walker until he had to go to the XFL, win MVP. And now people realize, wow, PJ Walker can play. Well, look at my scouting report back in 2018. It would have told you that. So you got to let things play out and just got to let it just sit. And when guys get opportunities, we just talked about Brock Purdy. So now when we look at Brock Purdy and my evaluation on him last year, I think it's like my 30th quarterback, right? If he just never plays, it looks like, well, you were right, right? But because he got an opportunity, now you get to see, okay, where did you miss? What did you get right? But if he doesn't play and doesn't get that opportunity, some people will say, oh yeah, that was a win. So no one understands nuance and context, and that's why I just sit back and laugh. Because those people that were going in, a lot of them still follow me. So if
Yeah.
obviously I'm not dumb enough to where you don't want to follow me. You follow me for a reason. Um, but some people like to win Twitter, but I just choose to win in life.
It's an awesome answer. Love it. I got two more questions. We got only a couple minutes left, but I want to get these out. So, what advice would you give to somebody that wants to get into scouting?
Be disciplined and be thorough. Period. Because if you're disciplined, you're gonna go through the process. You're gonna go through, okay, let me work on how can I get better in my craft? You know, if I have to study 3 games, let me study 3 games. Don't be afraid to say you don't know. You know, if you don't know something, pick up a phone, shoot an email to someone, ask someone. What am I watching here? What am I supposed to be looking at? What are you seeing in this? We disagree on this, right? The thorough part is do your due diligence. I know everybody ain't able. So if you are able to get to an all-star game, go and do it. And the thing is, it's easy to scout guys from Ohio State and Alabama because they're the top talented. So it's easy to sit there and say, oh, this guy's a really good player. Like, no, duh, he's at Alabama. Go watch a small college game. And when I say small college, I'm not talking about Vanderbilt. I'm talking about an FCS and below. Go watch the Division 3 game and pick out the guy that has pro talent because there's always one, But that helps you sharpen your blade. Everyone can watch the top guys and say, yeah, these are some really good athletes and good NFL future players. Like, yes, they are. That's why they're there. But go to the small school, go to the school that no one's talking about outside of the FBS and find the guy that has the NFL talent. That sharpens your blade as a scout and that keeps your blade sharp as well.
Awesome. Love that answer. Yeah. And this kind of ties into my last question before you get off is, I saw on Twitter you were talking about, obviously you watch USFL, XFL, NFL college, you do everything, but you had mentioned the European League of Football. I actually live in Stuttgart, Germany right now.
Yeah,
We
the
got the
surge.
Stuttgart Surge. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to get out and go watch the Surge a little bit, do some scouting. They had Marcel Dabo last year go to the Colts, I believe. Um, but yeah, if you're ever, getting out to watch some European League of Football, hit me up. I'm out here. So
I love it. I got engrossed in it last year because a lot of the guys that were in the American game that went out there to go play, it was like, wow, this is. I'm glad he's getting the opportunity to go and play, and it's unfortunate Jackson Urban retired because I was like, I'm glad he's out there proving that this dude can throw the football. Was tremendous at St. John's, played for the Vienna Vikings, and I'm glad the league is expanding. You got the Paris Musketeers now, and a lot more. There's 17 teams now. I know Istanbul, decided to not play.
yeah,
But I want to see that. I like the fact that they're developing their own talent, and there's only 4 or 5 Americans on the roster. That's fine. I like to see homegrown talent developed overseas because I feel like they could really build something special. I think they are. So I do have to get to a game over there and a couple of games, make it worth the while to get over there for at least 2 weeks to check out the ELF.
awesome. Yeah, hey, thanks for joining me today on this episode, Emory. We appreciate you, and we'd love to have you back at some time.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks again for the support. And fans can go and get that draft guide at footballgameplan.com/2023 draft guide.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Turn it back. Money.